All right, one last look at traffic and weather on your Wednesday morning. Several accidents to report. One at I-20 eastbound before Monticello Road. Another one at I-26 eastbound at St. Andrews. Sumter and Taylor Street. State Street at Knox Abbott Drive. And one more at Medical Drive at Sunset. Hey, guess what? It's going to be hot again. High of 95 today with a little bit of cloud cover. Tomorrow, high of 96 and a chance for some scattered thunderstorms. Similar forecast for Friday. Currently 80 here in downtown Columbia. That's traffic and weather on the game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, flying solo once again this morning. Again, Jack Veltri going to be back in here tomorrow. A lot to catch up with him about, as he's missed quite a bit over the course of the past week. So we'll catch up with him, find out what he's been doing. I've one of those people, as I've said before, that I don't like people to bother me when I'm on vacation or when I'm away. So I don't like to bother other people. So I don't even know what Jack's doing. I just know he's been out for a week. And again, we'll get his thoughts on everything that he did miss when he's back in here coming up tomorrow morning as we get close to wrapping up the week. And man, we're almost towards the middle of July already. And last night really truly felt like a quintessential dog day of summer, right? You know, you had, if you're like me and a Braves fan, that game was on. Started at 6:40 last night, so a little bit of an earlier game, and it very quickly went sideways as the Braves got obliterated by the Pirates 12-4. I knew as that game started when they talked about Skeens being on the mound and having lost, I believe, his last 9 starts. I'm like, well, there's a good chance that's going to be corrected tonight. And sure enough, it was. Ryan O'Hearn, the first baseman, by the way, 10 RBIs, 4 for 5 with 10 RBIs, 3 home runs last night. What a performance, unfortunately, not for the team that I was rooting for. So that game got sideways. The World Cup games wrapped up early in the afternoon yesterday. We'll get into, by the way, what Lionel Messi did a little bit later on, in the show. But you had those games wrapping up early, so once the Braves were out of reach in terms of winning that game last night, I'm just kind of looking around like, there's really not a whole lot of other things on. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's July 8th, and we are in the dog days of summer, because last night truly did feel like that. Thankfully, talking season has officially begun. Media days are underway. We'll get into what happened in the Big 12 yesterday out there. I think they're in Dallas again because there were a lot of headlines, some head scratchers, and some controversy as well from out there. As media days get underway, of course, we're only a week and a half away from SEC Media Days down in Tampa. I believe the ACC kickoff is coming up next week. The Big Ten, just looked up this morning, they're going to wrap up the month of July right there at the very end with their media days in Chicago, which, by the way, good on them for once again going back to a location that's centralized to most of their teams. Last year in Vegas was stupid because 25% of their conference is on the West Coast. The rest of them are in the Midwest and around the Northeast type of area. So we are kicking off talking season. And again, we'll get into all of what happened in Big 12 Media Days a little bit later on in the show, but we're inching ever closer to the start of college football season, and it cannot get here soon enough because we've focused on so many crazy, chaotic, and negative things happening around college football in the offseason that I'm just ready for games to start. And if you want more optimism, today's 59 days away from Carolina kicking off, only 52 days away from week 0 and seeing games that do actually count. So looking forward to that. And that brings us to our 59 days until kickoff countdown. And again, some days you got to get a little bit more creative than others. But I'm going to take the number 59 and I'm going to put a decimal point in between it. 5.9. Do you know what that is? That was the best third down yard to go average for South Carolina against a Power 4 opponent in all of last season. Now, average yards to go on third down and conversion percentages is something that I've been tracking the past couple of years. I have a spreadsheet for it, which I'm glad I do because moments like this, I'm like, oh, hey, I can bring this up and talk about it again. And last year against Kentucky, South Carolina had an average down and distance on third down of 5.9, and they proceeded to convert 8 out of 15 times, which was 53%, which was their best mark against a Power 4 opponent the entire season. Against Coastal, their average was 5.3. They converted 54%. But again, I'm just going to look at this from the lens of Power 4 opponents because most of their games, they were living in third and long. Against Virginia Tech, 9.3. Vanderbilt, 9.3. Missouri, 12.5. LSU, 10.3. Texas A&M 8.7. Like there were so many games where Carolina was consistently shooting themselves in the foot, and guess what? Most of those games, with the exception of Virginia Tech, they ended up losing. Right now, there's not a 1-to-1 correlation between having long third downs and winning or losing a game, but it certainly helps the less amount of distance you have to cover on third down to get a first down, and obviously sustaining drives and giving yourself more opportunities to score. And it's no secret, this is something that South Carolina has struggled with quite a bit in the Beamer era, and not just the down and distance when it comes to third downs, but also the overall conversions on a year-to-year basis, which, among many things, is something that we're hoping does end up improving this upcoming season. Yeah, Carolina was dead last year when it came to third down conversions. They were middle of the road in the conference 2 years ago, 11th in 2023, 10th in 2022, and then in Beamer's first year, 13th. So the 1 year they were actually pretty decent, 8th in the conference, was 2024, and that was really more in that back half of the season when things started really clicking because they were struggling a lot early in that year as well. In terms of down and distance on third down. Even games they won against like Kentucky 2 years ago, they were averaging 12.5 yards on third down. That's how bad it was early in the season. Again, they corrected it, ended up playing their best football late in the season, obviously correlated to them being contention for the college football playoff. So again, how do you fix this? How do you make those numbers better? How do you replicate what you did against Kentucky last year by being under 6 yards on average on third down and converting over half of your third down attempts? Well, it boils down simply to winning first and second down, right? Well, if you're getting 2 to 3, if you're getting 3 to 4 yards a pop on first and second down, well, guess what? You're setting yourselves up for 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, that type of stuff, which is a whole lot more manageable. And it also opens up your playbook a whole lot more as well. Because guess what? When you're in a 3rd and 8 or a 3rd and 10, running the football is kind of off the table. Now, yes, you have exceptions to the rule. We obviously know the 3rd and Sellers play from Clemson game 2 years ago where Sellers took off and ran and scored a touchdown, and it's one of the plays that we're going to be talking about forever in terms of the history of Gamecock football. One, as we learned from Dad Loggins the other week, it was not designed to go that way. Sellers just took off and ran, and it obviously ended up working out. But typically when you're in those third and long situations, your playbook gets a lot more limited because you don't have the ability to run the football because on average your runs are going to be somewhere between 3 to 5 yards at best. And if you're in a 3rd and 9, well, 5 yards doesn't really do much for you. It just maybe gives you a few more yards to to punt the football, right? You have to pass on those situations. It becomes a lot easier for the defense to defend because they have a better idea of what you're doing and those type of things. So when you're winning on first and second down, you set yourself up better for third down. And that's something that South Carolina, again, did not do very well last year. A lot of that does go on Mike Shula. How many times did we see inside zone runs on first and second down where each run went for maybe a yard to a yard and a half, and oh, well, there you go. Now you're in a 3rd and 8 or something along those lines. So this goes back to the conversation we've been having this entire offseason. We believe and we hope that Kendall Riles is going to be better when it comes to the play calling and choice of plays on first and second down that will set you up better for those third down situations when you do find yourself in them. Again, hopefully, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, where you have the full complement of your playbook and, again, a very, very talented quarterback that can use his legs when needed so you can, open up your full playbook on those type of plays. Avoiding pre-snap penalties and offensive line penalties in general, also something this team needs to improve on because, my goodness, and I hate to keep picking on him, but I feel like it's kind of the low-hanging fruit when we talk about the struggles of the offensive line last year. But how many times did Boaz Stanley have a snap infraction or an illegal snap or whatever, maybe false start? Like, my goodness, they especially the first play of the game against LSU had the illegal snap or snap infraction, whatever that penalty was, and you're already starting yourself off in 1st and 15, which again makes it that much harder to get yourself in to a third manageable situation when you start yourself behind the 8 ball. So that's another thing that drove us crazy last year was how many times Carolina on the offensive line shot themselves in the foot with just pre-snap penalties alone. Like holding, that's something that happens over the course of a football game, and different referees call it different ways. So that's something that you can get mad at to a degree, but pre-snap penalties drive you absolutely insane, especially ones happening at home. Right? Like being on the road at LSU, okay, you got 100,000 screaming fans. That's going to throw you off to a degree. When you're having those penalties at home, when guys can't get set, when guys don't know the snap count, that's a problem. And that is one of many reasons why Lonnie Teasley is no longer the offensive line coach here now. That's one of many reasons why your entire offensive line, for the most part, left in the transfer portal. You went out there and brought in a brand new one because that unit last year, the way they're being coached, the talent that they had, it just wasn't working. And as, again, we talk about so much this offseason, we're hoping that the addition of Randy Clements and all this new talent you're bringing in with a lot of experience, as we talked about, I believe, yesterday, I went back and referenced the article from the Big Spur that talked about this being the most experienced offensive line group just overall in terms of years played, career starts, snaps, all that stuff the Beamers ever had. And here's hoping that translates to, at the very least, not having a million false start penalties, not having a center that doesn't know that, is committing snap infractions, or an offensive line that doesn't know the snap count on the first play of the game. All those kind of things we hope are cleaned up this year that, again, will lead to you being in better situations, hopefully, when it comes to third down. And off of that, being better at run blocking, right? Which is something, again, this offensive line has struggled with in a lot of the Beamer tenure, because when you are ideally mixing in runs and passes on 1st and 2nd down, if you can guarantee that you're going to get, 3 to 4 yards of pop on a run on 1st down, well, guess what? That sets you up in a 2nd and 6. You get another 3 yards if you decide to run the ball again, and congratulations, you're in 3rd and 3. So being better at run blocking too is something that this team hopefully is going to improve on quite a bit, that just allows 1st and 2nd down to be more successful. And I hope, here's the thing, I hope Carolina never gets into a 3rd down, right? I think we all do. I hope they're converting on 1st and 2nd down consistently, scoring touchdowns left and right, and you never have a single 3rd down conversion the entire season. A lot of averages tell you that's probably not going to happen. When you do get in 3rd down situations, though, being in more manageable yardage that allows you a higher success rate is going to be vital, because as we've gone through, and I'll go through the schedule again coming up here in just a minute as we kind of recap our opponent previews that we've been doing over the past couple of weeks. The schedule's a bear, man. You got a gauntlet, especially in the back half of the season. You can't allow much margin for error on anything. And if you're putting yourself consistently in 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 12s, I can guarantee you're not going to win a lot of these games against really, really good teams. Because guess what? There's a lot of good defenses you're going to see this year that are pretty good at defending 3rd and long situations where they know you're going to be passing the ball, right? So keeping yourself out of those types of scenarios benefits you and hopefully sets this team up for success this upcoming season. Again, 3rd downs have been a consistent struggle in the Beamer era, and here's hoping with everything that's changed on the offense that gets corrected this upcoming year, because if you tell me they can consistently be in less than 6 yards on 3rd down, I'm going to be very happy, and I think we all are, in terms of what this team's success can be and how much the offense can sustain drives and move the football over the course of games. So there you go. 59 days into a kickoff, 5.9, their best average down and distance on 3rd down against Power 4 opponent last year, and here's hoping we see more of that this upcoming season. As I mentioned, we wrapped up our opponent preview yesterday with Clemson. By the way, we're going to talk some SEC football later on in the hour with Pat Smith of our sister station, Jocks FM, out in Birmingham. But coming up next, we're going to kind of comb back over everything with South Carolina's schedule, the high points of what we talked about when it came to the opponent previews. And do we look at the schedule any differently now that we've dove into all these teams? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. It's our head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game.
All right, everyone, as we close out the first hour here, let me tell you guys about AAA Heating and Air, where home comfort is their top priority. Give a call today at 803-677-1500 to schedule a seasonal maintenance appointment. Let AAA Heating and Air's qualified technicians put your mind at ease with a thorough inspection and cleaning of your heating and cooling system. Join their popular AAA Comfort Club to take advantage of special extras like flexible visits, added discounts, and priority scheduling. AAA Heating and Air also offers indoor air quality products that work with your HVAC system to improve your home's air quality. Cleaning the air eliminates common household odors, removes allergens and pollutants, and can even improve sleep and reduce the spread of some viruses. So go to callAAAtoday.com for more info. Again, that is callAAAtoday.com for more info. Tell them Jack from 107.5 The Game sent you on over.
All right, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. Again, coming up here in about 10 minutes, Pat Smith of our sister station Jocks FM out in Birmingham going to hop on and talk some SEC in general, right? We've been doing this opponent preview the past couple weeks, and I've been able to be joined by a couple people that cover various teams. Like we had Chapel Fowler on yesterday from the state newspaper to give us his thoughts on Clemson. So we'll kind of take a bigger look at the conference as a whole coming up here in about 10 minutes with our guy Pat Smith of Jocks FM. But now that we have wrapped up the opponent previews, and look, what we were doing was kind of giving you the 10,000-foot view on a lot of these teams for where they sit right now. Because, like we talk about so much with South Carolina, so many of these teams have question marks still. A lot of unknowns. Some of these teams don't even know who their quarterback is going to be going into this year yet because you haven't gotten into preseason camp in August. And right now, there's nothing going on. There aren't any practices. Coaches aren't talking, that kind of stuff. So we're kind of in a standstill really until we get into SEC Media Days coming up in a couple weeks. So it was good to be able to kind of skim over and hit the high points of what we do know and what we might be able to expect out of a lot of these teams that South Carolina's going to be playing this upcoming season. So I don't really think it changes the thought process and what the schedule is. I think very much we know the main storylines of what we have laid out ahead of us this upcoming season, and the first of which is, hey, you better take advantage of those first 6 games of the regular season. Kent State, Towson, those are games that you shouldn't have any problem winning. If you do have problems winning those games, and hey, again, I've been in the stadium for the Old Dominion game. I was there for Jacksonville State. I remember watching what happened against Citadel all those years ago. I know South Carolina is not immune to making these games more interesting than they should be, but here's hoping we don't have to talk about that in the first 2 weeks of the regular season. You win those 2 games, congratulations, you're 2-0. Now conference play starts. Not only that, you have no more cupcakes. You have no more tune-up games the rest of the year. From Mississippi State in week number 3 all the way to Clemson at the end of the regular season, 10 straight weeks against Power 4 opponents. Though, again, those first 6 games of the regular season, easier the way we view things right now than what the back half of the season is going to be. So the Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Florida games are games that you ideally need to take advantage of as best you can. At worst, being 2-1 in those matchups. Now you go to Alabama, it's gonna be tough. Again, you've put yourself in position to beat them the past couple times you played them, so not as challenging as maybe it once was when you're going on the road to see Nick Saban or something along those lines. But if Carolina lost to Alabama on the road in week number 4, that's not something that would shock all of us here or the entirety of college football, right? Like that kind of thing could feasibly happen. But the other 3 games, again, against Mississippi State, team that is on its way up, but still has a long way to go to being a solid team in the SEC. You enter year number 3 under Jeff Lebby, and then Kentucky and Florida at the back end of that with 2 new head coaches that they're breaking in that who knows what the heck those teams going to be, especially considering all the roster turnover, what those coaches, A, and Will Stein at Kentucky, who's never been a head coach before, and B, and John Summerall, who's getting his first opportunity to be a head coach at the FBS level. So until proven otherwise, we're going to hope that those teams are still trying to figure things out, and those are games that South Carolina can take advantage of before you head into your bye week. If you tell me that Carolina is sitting at 5-1 going into the bye week, I feel really good about your chances of it at the bare minimum, as we talk about, at the very least, making a bowl game. If you're at 4-2, okay, got a little bit more work cut out for you because the back half of the schedule is a lot more unforgiving, right? Tennessee, who if you listen to what Phil Steele told to Elijah and Preston when he was on with them the other day, he's expecting big things out of Tennessee this year. Now, again, as we talked about the other day when we previewed them, they still don't exactly know the quarterback situation. Got some options there that I'm sure they'll be figuring out here very soon. But that is a quarterback-friendly type of offense that Josh Heupel runs. So whoever they end up running with should still be in a situation where they can potentially be successful. You go to Oklahoma, take on A&M, 2 teams that were obviously in the college football playoff a year ago. You get what I think all of us circle as maybe the easiest game on the schedule, though it is on the road against Arkansas. And now, again, it's in the middle of that gauntlet, so you could be pretty beat up after 3 weeks of Tennessee, Oklahoma, and A&M. But here's hoping the road trip to Arkansas is a reprieve, and that as Ryan Silverfield also transitions into being a head coach at the FBS level for the first time, you can take advantage of that team as they're still trying to get their feet underneath them. And I think based on, again, kind of diving into these teams for our opponent preview, they've still got a long road ahead of them, right? Now, again, as I've said many times, you always got to throw out the caveat out there. Maybe he's the next Curt Cignetti. Maybe he has that magic touch, and maybe he's brought in the right roster that turns this thing around in the snap of the fingers, and Arkansas is the number one team in the country by the time you go there. I tend towards that not likely being the case, but in today's world of college football, you can never say never, so you always got to throw that out there, though I don't think that's going to happen, as I think it's going to be a long rebuilding process for Ryan Silverfield out there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Then after that, you go from what's probably your easiest game as far as power opponents go in Arkansas to what I think goes without saying is probably your toughest. The next week with Georgia coming into town, you do get it at home, so that is something. But as we previewed Georgia the other day, a lot of guys returning from last year, even though they did lose a lot of guys to the NFL. Stockton, one of the more experienced quarterbacks in the SEC, coming back, for another season. They didn't hit the transfer portal a ton, but the guys they did bring in are expected to be big impact guys. And again, they're typically playing their best football late in the season. Again, Carolina historically always ran into them in, September, in the Spurrier years and all that kind of stuff, where there's some great classic games. But, in a lot of years, Georgia was kind of trying to figure themselves out at the early point in the season. But they are typically playing their best football late in the year, and you get them coming in here as who knows where they're going to be ranked, somewhere in the top 5 probably, more likely than not, on the penultimate week of the regular season. And then the Clemson game, as we discussed yesterday. Again, I hate to keep saying this, but it's kind of true. Who knows, right? Because, last year Clemson had some of the best returning production in all of college football, and they ended up having more draft picks than wins a season ago. Now you're saying, okay, now you're turning the reins over to Christopher Vizina at quarterback. You have some guys returning. You have some notable players on defense and stuff like that, like Sammy Brown, that are expected to be playmakers once again. Will Helt, guys like that. But last year they didn't live up to expectations. Can they this year? Who knows? But obviously, anytime Carolina and Clemson, no matter what the records are, no matter where one team is, no matter where the other team is, that's always going to be a game where truly anything can happen, as we've seen over the past couple of years. So I don't know. Phil Steele, for what it's worth, in his magazine, does have South Carolina's schedule rated as the 25th toughest in the country. Texas is number 1, Michigan number 2. If you're wondering there, I mean, it's still in the top quadrant or top 5th, 20% of college football. But I still think with as many teams that were in the college football playoff a year ago, only being 25th, probably a little bit low there. Now again, Phil Steele has a zillion metrics and stuff for why he puts these kind of lists together and stuff like that. But I would think Carolina would be a little bit higher on this list. Now again, as we know, as the season goes along, and as we learn about more teams and see games being played, the thought on the schedule is going to shift quite a bit. But even sitting here right now, with as many first-year head coaches as you are playing, I still think this is one of the toughest schedules in the country for Carolina, considering, again, what they have in the back half of the season. And here's hoping that they can recapture some of that magic from 2 years ago, particularly in those last 6 games, to make sure they're playing their best football then. And hopefully, they live up to the billing of what Coach Beamer said back in November, that when we're in November of 2026, we're talking about this team flirting with or being in the conversation for a college football playoff spot. So we'll see. Again, 59 days until kickoff to start finding out how Carolina fares against these respective opponents. So now that we've looked at all the opponents for South Carolina, let's take a look at the SEC as a whole with our guy Pat Smith of Jocks FM coming up next. It is the Extra Point. It's our head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game, inching ever closer to the start of the college football season. Let's talk about what's going to be going on in the SEC this upcoming year as we head out to the AAA Heating and Air phone lines and welcome in Pat Smith from our sister station, Jocks FM, out in Birmingham. Pat, appreciate the time. Hopefully the summer's treating you well. How are we doing today?
Tyler, I'm doing well. Yes, you said it best. We are inching so close. Watching Big 12 Media Days out in Dallas, it's kind of getting us all going, thinking about Tampa in a couple weeks. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, officially, I thought it was pretty funny. The World Cup ends for the U.S. men's national team, transitions perfectly into the start of talking season. Because really, for a lot of people, the World Cup was kind of holding the place of a sport we're waiting that's helping us, wait out until college football gets here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was ironic how that happened, how European football ended in the United States, and then we just picked it up and said, you know what, we got media days coming up in college football, and then we've got NFL training camps right around the corner. So, yeah, it could not have ended at a more perfect time.
Pat Smith of Jocks FM joining us here in the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Out there in Birmingham, you're obviously right there in the center of two of the most passionate fan bases in all the SEC and college football with Alabama and Auburn, and two fan bases in kind of different headspaces going into this year. Of course, Alabama, they make the playoff a year ago. Okay, good, Kalen DeBoer, but can you get us back to being a national championship contender as you enter into year number 3? And then Auburn, as they completely clean house once again and are starting over with Alex Golesh, where I guess hope always springs eternal when you have a new coach until you start playing games. What's kind of been the dynamic you've noticed from these fan bases this offseason so far?
Well, I can tell you, one, it's Alabama needs to find a running game. And obviously in your neck of the woods with South Carolina and Bama playing again this year, can Alabama find a running game? Alabama was second worst in the SEC in running the football. Their offensive line, all brand new guys. They're going to have to step up. They got a quarterback competition going on. The defensive side of the ball is going to be one of the better defenses that Alabama's had in quite some time. And I'm talking about a dominating type of defense. The secondary could be the best in the country, and the linebacking core very good. So they're not too worried about that side of the ball. It's got to score points. And the quarterback situation is a big question mark. So there's a lot of apprehension from Alabama fans. It was big for Kalen DeBoer to get that win on the road in the college football playoff. Unfortunately, he got embarrassed in the Rose Bowl. He did get a big new contract extension. So Bama fans are stuck with Kalen DeBoer. Hopefully, they think that he's going to be able to figure this out. But there's a lot of question marks, especially on the offensive side of the ball for Alabama, that they hope will be rectified before they get into a very tough stretch in October in the SEC. Meanwhile, down on the Plains, you mentioned it, Tyler, a lot of eternal optimism with this football team, another coaching change. But I'll tell you the difference. As you know, because you cover this league extensively, you got to have a top-notch quarterback. And the bottom line is Auburn University has not had a top-notch quarterback in quite some time. Well, they're bringing in Byron Brown, who put up incredible numbers, yes, in the American Conference, but he knows the system that Alex Golesh is bringing to the Plains. DJ Durkin's defense is going to be top-notch again. So if you get any type of offense, it's almost like the Alabama situation. You get any type of offense, you feel pretty good. The Auburn schedule is probably not going to allow them to think about 8 or 9 wins this year, but definitely a bowl game. So it's kind of baby steps with the Auburn fan base, but they really like what they're doing in recruiting, just like South Carolina's doing well in recruiting. That's exactly what Auburn's doing right now. They got a top 10 class. And so right now, Auburn fans are, they're a little bit apprehensive about going into the year thinking they can get to 8 or 9 wins, but they know that there's a couple swing games. If it goes their way, this season could definitely turn a lot better than they originally thought.
As you mentioned, Carolina and Alabama squared off the past couple of years. 2 very entertaining games that have pretty much come down to the wire in both instances, and will square off again in Tuscaloosa coming up early this season. I always like to ask people outside of the Columbia bubble how they view things here. As Beamer goes into year number 6, we know, hey, job's kind of on the line if you can't be better than 4-8 or 5-7. How do you view what he's done here and what to expect out of this team this upcoming season?
Well, Tyler, you said it best. I mean, being outside of that bubble, a lot of people would not say that he's on that proverbial hot seat, but they understand that South Carolina fans, they expect a little bit more. You're also sandwiched into a very interesting recruiting area. That's where I think it's been so big for him over the course of the last couple of weeks. I mean, he's doing very well in recruiting. And, you know, when you're talking about a state like South Carolina, it's very similar to Alabama. We have a lot of really good high school top-notch talent, but you really need to keep outside schools from coming in and taking those players. Now, granted, just like in South Carolina, you got Clemson and South Carolina kind of having that checks and balance system going on. That's what we have in Alabama, with Alabama and Auburn recruiting against each other. But you don't need Georgia. You don't need Florida. You don't need Tennessee coming into your state and pulling kids out. And for Shane Beamer to be able to show the top recruiting teams in the conference that, you know what, we're going to build a wall here and we're going to be able to keep these kids, and then we're going to be able to go out and we're going to add kids outside of our footprint. I think that says a lot. That's also raising the bar for expectations, which are already high in my opinion for Shane Beamer. But overall, I think Shane has done, granted it might upset some people in your neck of the woods, but from my perspective, I think Shane has done a commendable job. Should he have won more games? Yes, because you are in the SEC, high expectations. But overall, I would not put him squarely on a hot seat. I would not.
Again, talking to Pat Smith of Jocks FM here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. You know, I feel like the past couple of years, Georgia hasn't necessarily been looked at as maybe the favorite going into the year to win the entire conference. Lo and behold, they end up doing it both years, beating Texas and Alabama in the last two SEC championship games. Is this just Georgia's conference until proven otherwise, or do you think this year somebody else truly does take that crown?
Well, it's kind of muscle memory, right? I mean, because back when Nick Saban was in Tuscaloosa, we'd be at SEC Media Days, and it was very easy to say, okay, Bama and Georgia, okay, let's just flip those two teams every year. And then once Nick Saban retired, obviously Georgia and Kirby Smart, they ascended to the throne, so to speak, and then Texas has tried to become that team. Listen, Tyler, we're all going to have to get used to the NFL mentality in this league, and let me define that. To me, that means that you might find a team that has an 8-4 record or a 9-3, where in years past you would be ready to fire your head coach if that were to happen. See, Alabama, Kalen DeBoer goes 9-3, but it's good enough to play for an SEC championship that he lost. But he got to the college football playoff, won a game, and then he lost a game. So you think about the NFL, because a lot of people don't remember, well, who won the NFC Central last year, or whatever the case may be. I mean, you know, it's a situation where if you just get to the playoffs, that means a lot. And now with a 9-game conference schedule, and you look at Georgia's schedule, a 6-game stretch of Oklahoma, Vandy, Bama, Auburn, Florida, that's obviously going to be played in Atlanta. And then you got Ole Miss, and then you look at Texas's schedule. Not only you've got the SEC gauntlet, but you got Ohio State in week 2, and you got Tennessee, you got Oklahoma, Florida, Ole Miss, trips to LSU and Texas A&M. This is a brutal, brutal schedule for all teams. So I know that we're going to get to Tampa, and we're going to probably say Texas and Georgia is going to be your 1-2. But right now on paper, I would not be surprised at the two teams that meet in Atlanta has 2 losses, and we're trying to figure out a tiebreaker in regards to who is going to go to Atlanta. I think the league is going to be this tough. Sorry for the long answer for your short question, but I do believe that Georgia will be one of those teams that's sitting on top when we get to Atlanta.
About 2 more minutes here. I was obviously mentioned Alex Golesh a moment ago going to year number 1 at Auburn. So many new faces coming to the SEC as first-time head coaches. Now we got a little bit of a sample size of Pete Golding last year in the college football playoffs. Yeah. So I'll kind of focus on the other guys. Silverfield coming in at Arkansas, Summerall coming in at Florida, Will Stein coming in at Kentucky. How do you kind of view who's going to have the most success and who might be able to truly get their respective programs into being contention in this conference the quickest?
Great question, and I will tell you the interesting game to pay a lot of close attention to. I know people in my audience in Birmingham will, and that's John Summerall at Florida as he brings the Gators to Jordan-Hare to take on Alex Golesh in Auburn. And the reason why this is so interesting, first off, John Summerall's from Huntsville, Alabama. John Summerall coached in the state at Troy before he went to Tulane. Now he's at Florida. He's got family still in the state of Alabama. He's an Alabama kid. So now he's coming back to Alabama to a school that wanted John Summerall before Alex Golesh. John Summerall was the number 1 choice for Auburn Obviously, when the negotiations and things were going on, they just did not fit a match with one another. He ends up at Florida. Alex Golesh ends up at Auburn. So there might be a little bit of buyer's remorse for either school, depending on who wins that game. So I think that's going to be a big swing game for either one of those programs. I think if Florida gets the win on the road at Auburn, then Florida, all of a sudden, that win total might go above that 7.5. If you got Auburn winning at home, their 6.5 number might go up. So that's a big game. But I think Summerall is the guy that I would pay very close attention to because he's done a really nice job recruiting, and I think he's got enough games on that schedule where if he wins a couple of those, then all of a sudden Florida is a team that out of nowhere people could be talking about.
Things to look forward to when the season kicks off, man. We'll probably see you in about 2 weeks here at SEC Media Days, and, man, just can't wait to finally be able to talk about games again,
Oh, no, absolutely, Tyler. Hey, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pat Smith there of Jocks FM joining us on the AAA heating and air phone lines as we bounce around the SEC a little bit. And look, there's plenty more storylines happening in this conference, but that's what we could squeeze into about 10 or so minutes there. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1. Lionel Messi doing the unthinkable, helping save Argentina's World Cup run. We'll discuss that and what that maybe means for the United States in terms of the outlook in the future coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on The Game. It's all right here for our friends over at Twin Peaks, located right down the street from us here in Columbia at 600 Gervais Street over in the Vista. That big soccer tournament is winding down, but still plenty more games going on And there's only one place to take in all that great action. That's with our friends over at Twin Peaks. Pull up a bar stool, order yourself some delicious scratch-made food from the Twin Peaks kitchen. Don't forget about those 29-degree draft beers to wash it all down with as well. And hey, even when that soccer tournament ends, there's still baseball, women's basketball. We're closing in on the start of football season, and all that great sports action is going to be on those Twin Peaks TVs. So don't miss any of it, no matter the day of the week, weekend, or whenever. Twin Peaks has got you covered. Twin Peaks eats, drinks, and scenic views.
Otra vez Messi, se desvía la pelota que cae al área, no pudo Julián Messi. ¡Gol!
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. I would head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Yes, indeed. You may not speak Spanish, but you at least heard Messi there at the very beginning. That was the Telemundo call of Lionel Messi tying things up with Egypt after Argentina was down 2-0 entering the final about 11 minutes of yesterday's match in the round of 16 out there in Atlanta. They end up with a Christian Romero goal in the 79th minute, and then Lionel Messi scores in the 83rd minute to tie it up there, and then Enzo Fernandez would score the winning goal there in stoppage time to allow Argentina to pick up 3-2 victory in a comeback that I think shocked a lot of people. Again, it looked like Egypt had them completely on the ropes and were going to put them away. There was a goal that was taken off the board for Egypt that created a little bit of controversy and some arguments with officials in that game. But what's done is done. Argentina ends up picking up the victory, and Lionel Messi also takes the lead in the Golden Boot race for the World Cup in terms of who scores the most goals overall, as they look to try and defend their title. And watching that game yesterday, because, again, Messi's legitimately one of the greatest of all time, so it's not shocking that he went out there and made a critical goal to help his team continue on in the World Cup. But after watching what happened with the U.S. Women's National Team the other day, and maybe maybe this is an obvious statement to make, but to me it kind of stands out that the U.S. Men's National Team is never going to be a serious threat in the World Cup until they have a dude. Right? Like, you look at this tournament, and again, the Golden Boot race speaks volumes to who the best of the best are, because you have Messi, you have Erling Haaland, you have Kylian Mbappe, you have Harry Kane, all being the leading scorers and leading their teams deep into this tournament as we get set to crown a champion coming up here in about a week and a half. And all those guys are recognized as among the best players in the world. I know Cristiano Ronaldo and his team didn't have the best tournament, but still the cream is really rising to the top, and all these great teams are typically led by one elite, world-renowned superstar type of player that America, quite frankly, just doesn't have. And I don't know if they ever will. And this kind of goes back to our conversation we've been having a lot with the U.S. Men's National Team and why this run has been so intriguing, because we've never really been given a whole lot of reason to be super optimistic going into a World Cup, because it's just not the sport that America excels at, right? In terms of the priority list, behind football, baseball, basketball, and all those others, I don't know, it's like fifth or so, depending on who you ask. And the majority of our best athletes don't end up playing soccer. If it was our number one sport, I don't doubt at all that America could be phenomenal at it. But the way things are set up now, and the way our society views it, I just don't think that's going to be the case. And again, America's just never really had that dude that is looked at as legitimately one of the best in the world leading the charge for the U.S. Men's National Team, and that's what it takes right? That's what it takes to win this thing. That's what it takes to get into the deep waters of this tournament. And I don't know what has to change, and I don't know if it ever will change to put America in that position. And I imagine for a lot of you, with America being eliminated, you're probably not even watching the tournament anymore, right? Like, I'm still keeping up with it, and we were watching the game yesterday with Argentina and Egypt as the halftime show was going on, but that's really stood out to me is like watching it and being like, man, that's why Argentina wins this thing. That's why England is on the run that it's on. That's why Norway is being basically carried by Erling Haaland, because they really don't have a great history when it comes to the World Cup, but he's doing so much heavy lifting himself because of how great of a player he is. And unfortunately, America just doesn't have that. You got good players, right? Flo Balogun, who, again, went through the controversy of getting his red card overturned. Christian Pulisic. Like, you have guys that are good, but nobody that's on the level of these superstars that are commanding the headlines of the tournament this year. And until America gets that, I don't know if they're ever going to be a true factor in being able to win a World Cup on the men's side of things. And that's unfortunate. Now, again, for most people, that's not overly upsetting because soccer is something you only care about every 4 years when the World Cup's going on. But if you're a diehard U.S. men's national team soccer fan and want to see this happen at some point in your life, the star power's got to get better, and I don't know if it ever will. But that's what really stood out to me yesterday in terms of watching that and being like, yeah, that's the missing piece that America just doesn't have, is that dude that takes the game over or comes up with that critical. That kind of critical goal over and over and over and over and over again to help lead a team deep into this tournament. But congrats to Argentina and Lionel Messi. No game today, which is weird, considering we've just kind of been in this flow of games for the past 2.5, 3 weeks. But they get back in action tomorrow as they begin the, I believe, semifinals, and we get set to crown champion again coming up here in a couple of our quarterfinals. Yeah, quarterfinals as we get set to crown champion coming up here in about a week and a half. Hour number 1 of the books coming up in hour number 2. We'll bounce around the SEC a little bit more. Athlon has their bowl projections out. Where's South Carolina headed? Tell you about that next here on the Extra Point on the Game. All right, welcome back in hour number 2. Here's the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We're going to get into the start of talking season. You heard Pat Smith allude to it a couple minutes ago that the Big 12 started their media days yesterday, and there's a lot of headlines coming out of that. Some interesting news and some awkward interactions between Brett Yormark and media members out there that we'll get into coming up in a couple minutes. Also, at the bottom of the hour, Jen Jensen going to join me to talk some NASCAR, as she was in Chicagoland this past weekend for the return to the track for the first time in 7 years, and what I think was a pretty darn good race. So we'll get into that with her coming up at 10:30. But if you know me, you know I am a sucker for a good bowl projection. I will read a bowl projection in January, July, October, November. It doesn't matter. I love looking forward, especially with how many bowls there are, obviously how expanded the playoffs become, to see where people's minds are at when it comes to what they think certain teams are going to be capable of and what they think certain teams are going to do. And for South Carolina, a team that did not make a bowl game last year and has missed a bowl game in 2 out of the last 3 prior seasons, being projected in any bowl is a step forward, right? As we talked about, if Beamer goes 6-6, as much as the fan base itself may not be thrilled by that, it's still a 2-game improvement, and at least you're still playing a 13th game somewhere in the country in the month of December, compared to sitting at home and watching everybody else play games like you did last year. So Athlon is the latest to put out their bowl projections. And I'm not really shocked by this, because this is kind of the realm that I've seen, like CBS, ESPN, other places that have put out bowl projections so far this year. They have South Carolina in the Music City Bowl taking on Nebraska, which that game would be a reunion with not only Marcus Satterfield, who's their tight ends coach now after he got demoted from being offensive coordinator, tells you a lot, but also Lonnie Teasley is there now, as well as I believe Tree Babalade also on that roster, following Lonnie Teasley after leaving South Carolina. So in a way, it would be seeing a lot of familiar faces from over the years if Carolina did square off with Nebraska in the Music City Bowl. Again, that's a bowl that kind of based on history tells you you're probably around 6 to 7 wins in the SEC. Again, is the fan base going to be thrilled about that? Probably not. But it's a several game improvement over what you were last year. And I guess depending, as we talk about a lot, depending on how you achieve those 6 wins and how you achieve those 6 losses, dictates a lot of how that's viewed and if that's good enough to keep him around for 27 and beyond and all that kind of stuff. I do think it's interesting when you look at that matchup, because Matt Rule he struggled, to say the least, in his tenure so far out there in Nebraska, as he was the guy that was supposed to bring them back to national prominence. And when you look at his now 3 seasons there so far, an even 19-19, coming off 2 7-6s in bowl appearances the past couple of years, with some pretty good talent on that roster, right? The NIL resources at Nebraska are said to be pretty good, maybe not the best in the country, but pretty good. So if theoretically Carolina was 6-6 matching up with a 6-6 Nebraska, they might be playing an interim coach, because Matt Rule might be gone if he's backing up another 500-ish season out there out there in Nebraska. So I don't know, that would be interesting. We're certainly shooting higher than that, right? You don't want to be playing in Memphis in the Music City Bowl. You would much rather be playing obviously in a college football playoff bowl, but if nothing else, being back in a Citrus Bowl, a Gator Bowl, one of those more high-end bowl games, where you're around the 8 to 9 win mark, if nothing else this upcoming season. But obviously a lot of football played between now and then to see how that ends up shaking out. My question with this, because again, as I've read as many bowl projections as I can so far this offseason for South Carolina, it's all kind of right around that Music City Bowl. Texas Bowl was one of them, which again is 7-ish wins typically, I think, in the SEC. Can Beamer use this as a disrespect card, right? We talk about this a lot, that Carolina is at its best when they're being overlooked, right? When you had the crazy end of the 2022 season and Carolina looked like the hottest team in college football for the final 2 weeks of the regular season, they went into the 2022 offseason with a ton of momentum, right? Rattler's coming back. You got a lot of talent coming back and reason to be excited. and they'd be projected as a top 25 team and all this kind of stuff going into 2023, and they proceed to go 5-7 and miss a bowl game. All right, nobody's talking about you going into the 2024 season. You go out there and knock on the door of the playoff with, again, a heater of a run at the back end of the season, winning your final 6 regular season games, and then you go into last year's offseason, being talked about, hey, Sellers, Heisman, first-round draft pick. Look at Nick Harbor. Look at Dylan Stewart. And then you go out there and you go 4-8, the worst season in the Beamer era so far. So you're already not being talked about a ton. So that does kind of play into, again, what's beneficial to South Carolina and Beamer more often than not anyway. But I almost wonder as well if you need that extra bit of fuel, that extra bit of respect, so to speak, to be able to fan the flames of this team, considering what we think the talent of this team is. I just ran through players: Sellers, Stewart, Harbor, Jakarius Peak, the guys you got coming back on defense, your linebacking core, Vakari Swain, young guys like Jazavian Currents, Noah Clark, Julian Walker. Can you say, wow, them only saying we're going to be in the Music City Bowl, that's disrespectful? Is that bulletin board material? I don't know. I guess we can find out from Beamer coming up in a couple weeks at Media Days if somebody gets the opportunity to ask him that question. But if you need to look for anything and you're trying to search around saying, all right, hey, how can I spin this into something that's going to motivate the team? Maybe with what we think might be one of the most talented rosters that Beamer's had in his tenure so far, only being projected to win 6-ish games and being playing in Memphis on December 30th or whatever, maybe that's the motivation you can use to continue to fuel this team to hopefully go out there and have a much, much better season than what they're projecting for you to have as of right now. I don't know. We'll see. It's just something I thought about when I saw that latest projection, because, again, most of these kind of have Carolina in that same realm of being around the 6 to 7-ish win team, though, again, that would be a pretty significant improvement from where you were at a season ago. Elsewhere on this, again, this is Athlon's bowl projections and playoff field projections for the upcoming college football season. Not really a surprise that they have 5 teams in the SEC competing in the college football playoff, where they have LSU as I guess that would be the 10 seed, taking on Miami. You have Oklahoma and A&M as the 8-9 seed. And then you have Georgia and Texas as the 2 and 3 seeds, respectively, getting the first round byes. And this is just Athlon, but they do at the very least have an SEC team returning to play for the national championship, as they have Georgia falling to Ohio State in the national championship in Las Vegas this year. Which, in case anybody didn't know, I didn't even think about that. But the national championship is in Las Vegas this year, and Athlon Sports has Ohio State beating Georgia to win the crown. That would at least be a step back in the right direction for the SEC, right? Going 3 straight years without even playing for the national championship, having a team in it is at least being able to say, hey, guess what? We're back, right? To some degree. Winning it would obviously be the best thing for the conference, but you wouldn't have to deal with hey, look, 4 years in a row and the SEC couldn't even get a team into the national championship game. What's going on here? And in fact, the way this breaks down, having Georgia at 2 and Texas at 3, they have them squaring off in the Sugar Bowl, which would guarantee, which is a semifinal game this year, which will guarantee the SEC at least one spot in the national championship game. Again, are these projections going to end up being the case? I don't know. It's always fun to look at these in the summertime as the season goes along to see how opinions and things change. There could very likely be a case where another team, again, I kind of ran through, schools in the SEC with brand new head coaches that we're not talking about because, all right, that guy's in year number 1 or he's making the jump from G5 up to Power 4, bringing a ton of transfers with him. He's not going to be successful, and maybe that guy's the next Kurt Cignetti, and who knows what happens. But as we've seen the past couple of years, there is typically a lot of new blood that enters into the college football playoff on a year in, year out basis. But as I look at this list here that, again, is projected by Athlon Sports, it's really a lot of the same teams. The only exception, the only new team they have entering into the college football playoff that has not been a part of it in the past couple years is LSU. Again, as the 10 seed. They have them taking on the 7 seed in Miami in that opening round. And again, as we talk about, that is I think the bare minimum for a lot of fans out there in LSU is like, hey, this team with Lane Kiffin in year number 1 should be at least good enough to be in that playoff conversation. Right? Now, again, Lane Kiffin's starting to temper those expectations a little bit with things that he said in this offseason, like, hey, let's cool the jets a little bit. It is year number one. We are bringing a lot of transfers. Maybe this won't be as phenomenal of a year as some might think. I don't think you can do that with this fan base. LSU hired you to be the guy that brings them back to the top, right? Prior to Brian Kelly, all three of the previous head coaches, and Lane Kiffin, Les Miles, and Ed Orgeron, had all won national championships, and that's exactly what they're expecting out of Lane Kiffin. As I ran through yesterday, Kiffin does typically struggle in year number one. When you kind of combine the average wins and losses in year number one at Tennessee, SoCal, and then at Ole Miss, he's about a 7-5 coach. Now, year number two, he didn't have a year number two at Tennessee because he, headed out for L.A. in the middle of the night, but at both SoCal and Ole Miss, that's when he won 10 games, was in year number two. So history tells you Lane Kiffin is more of a year two type of guy. Now, again, a lot's changed. We're in a very different era of college football that he's entering into in year number one, where I think it goes without saying this is the best year one roster he's going to ever have at any school. So that does set the expectations a little bit higher there. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. Again, Athlon has Ohio State and Georgia playing for the national championship, and maybe it's because there's been so many other things going on off the field this year. The Sorsby situation, Lane Kiffin versus Ole Miss when it comes to the verbal jabs in the media and stuff like that. But I feel like, do we not have like a concrete favorite for the national championship going into this year? Maybe I've overlooked it. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Maybe it's just assumed that it is Ohio State with Sayin coming back, Jeremiah Smith, talent on defense, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like, at least from a conversation standpoint, when I listen to shows, when I listen to the podcast, when we've been in here talking about it, I don't know if we've all settled on like a specific favorite, right? Which typically I feel like, at least as we get late into the summer, there's usually like one or two teams that most people kind of universally say, like, yeah, that's probably the team that's going to win the entire thing until proven otherwise. And again, maybe it's just we're, just kind of quietly assuming it's going to be the Ohio State or Georgia or Notre Dame or Texas or something along those lines. But I do feel like the conversations have not been quite as loud this offseason for whatever reason. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you hear it differently. Maybe you're listening to different shows and podcasts and stuff like that. But it hasn't quite stuck out to me as much this offseason as maybe it has in years past. But again, 59 days away from kickoff, and we'll see who comes out on top in late January this year. I think this year is the year that the championship's on the January 25th or something ridiculous like that. Either way, we're almost in football season, and that means we've entered into talking season as the Big 12 Media Days got kicked off yesterday, and oh boy, are there a lot of headlines. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game.
All right, everybody, let's tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. As always, the presenting sponsor of the Garnet Trust Hour on Tuesdays and Thursdays here on the Game. Krantz Cooling and Heating has been providing great HVAC services to Midlands residents and businesses since 1983. And now that same great service that you're accustomed to for your heating and your air conditioning now applies to the plumbing line. You can hit them up at 803-672-3224. You can also go to their website at krantzcooling.com. That's Krantz, cooling with a K.com. You can text them directly from their website. Let them know about what HVAC issues you're seeing at your home or business, what plumbing problems you're having. They'll schedule an appointment, come out, take care of it. Shout out to Justin Krantz, the general manager there. They do an incredible job. They've been out to my home in Wes's. Let them come out to yours. krantzcooling.com.
All right, welcome back in. Is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We're officially in talking season. That's right, media days are officially underway. I feel like this is typically the case, but once again, the Big 12 has kicked things off with their media days. I believe it's in Dallas. Don't quote me on that. I think they're in Dallas again. They're typically at Jerry World, I believe, where they just kind of open up the floor of the stadium, have all the coaches and players and stuff like that. And a lot of headlines came out of yesterday. As you would imagine, with the news of the offseason largely surrounding Brendan Sorsby, not just in the Big 12, but in all of college football, Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, likely was going to be asked about Sorsby, probably pretty quickly off the jump. So as he gave his opening address and then opened things up for questions from the media, no surprise, a question about Sorsby came up pretty quickly. Here was Yormark's response.
Today is not the time to address that issue. Today is about celebrating the upcoming football season and celebrating our 16 schools.
Well, media days is for the opportunity for media to ask you questions because they don't typically get to talk to you a lot during the off season. So, I mean, you kind of had to know that a question about Sorsby was coming. And here's the thing, like, Yormark's a unique guy, right? He's done a lot of things over the years that aren't in line with what a lot of commissioners would do. So I'm always intrigued by the way he goes about things because he definitely goes to the beat of his own drum. But going into this, knowing how big of a story that is, knowing that you're still embroiled in a lawsuit, by the way, as the Big 12 with Texas Tech over that situation, that lawsuit has not gone away, for those that don't know, you had to know a question was coming. And not having a prepared statement, a canned answer ready for that is it's surprising to me, right? If nothing else, because of the pending litigation, you can say, hey, there's still pending litigation going on as of right now. I've been advised not to speak on that any further, and that's all I have to say. That answers the question for just about everyone. Like, hey, I can't ask him because of the lawsuit stuff. He's not going to give me an answer. But being very defensive about this, not really a good look. And it extended further as he got a little snippy with a Texas Tech beat reporter podcaster, I'm not exactly sure what he is, who asked, albeit a odd and long question, but Yormark was very snappy when it came to his response. Now, I'm going to only play the back half of this. The guy asks his question the first time. Again, it's very long, so I wanted to cut this clip down a little bit. And after asking the question the first time, which Yormark was able to hear, I'm assuming pretty clearly, here's what he said, and here's the question a second time.
Ask that question again, and I'm going to give you the answer I want to give you, so go ahead.
Texas Tech got fined for tortillas, and tortillas were banned outright. OSU has had paddles that were given a noisemaker exemption back in 2012. Sorsby never played a snap for the Red Raiders, and yet there's a lawsuit. Cincinnati has yet to be touched. You're selling greater than 12. Why should Texas Tech fans believe them?
No, I didn't say greater than 12. You misquoted me. I said we're going forward as 16 strong, and that's my answer to your question. But thank you for that question. Appreciate it.
Gentleman in the black.
For one, I don't think either side looks good on that. That was very long-winded and all over the place type of question that was asked, but I don't think their answer by Yormark there was great either. And real quick, to answer the question of what the guy asked in reference to Cincinnati not being, penalized or anything like that, up to this point, there is nothing that proves that Cincinnati had any knowledge of Sorsby's issue while he was playing for them. Now, if that comes out later, then yeah, there's a list of problems they're going to have to deal with and maybe lawsuits on their own and all that kind of stuff. But up to this point, Cincinnati does not have blood on their hands, so to speak, when it comes to the Sorsby situation. That's why they haven't been penalized or gotten in trouble or anything like that in reference to it. But the Sorsby thing was just kind of a cloud hanging over all of Big 12 media days, understandably so, because of how big of a story it was this offseason. And other coaches talked, and we may get into that, if not today, coming up tomorrow, in reference to other storylines in the Big 12. One thing that I was, I guess, not shocked by, but kind of came out of left field, was an announcement that the Big 12 had yesterday to open up their media days, and that is their new partnership. Monster Energy Drink has become the entitlement sponsor for Big 12 football, men's and women's basketball as well. This will come with a jersey patch and logos on the field as well this upcoming season. And it will now be referred to as Monster Energy Big 12 football. They essentially have followed the NASCAR model of entitlement sponsorship. Now, for those that don't know, Brett Yormark actually worked in corporate branding for NASCAR about 20 years ago. He helped out with the Nextel deal when NASCAR went from Winston cigarettes to Nextel cell phones as their entitlement sponsor. At the time was the biggest deal in the sports history. Brett Yormark was involved in that. So it doesn't surprise me that he's kind of following along a NASCAR type of entitlement sponsor model that, again, will now be called Monster Energy Big 12 football. But when the numbers for this came out, it was surprising to me because the breakdown of this is $20 million annually for Monster, that Monster is paying to the Big 12 to be the entitlement sponsor for football, men's and women's basketball. If the schools are getting every cent of that money, that is only $1.25 million per school, which, hey, that's $1.25 million you didn't have beforehand, right? But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot, especially for the jersey patches, right? And we know that once this was approved in the offseason, every school is going to be looking at this. And I'm not going to be shocked if at least every Power 4 school has some form of jersey patch, including South Carolina, by the time the season rolls around. And what the Big 12 essentially did was took some of that real estate away from teams to be able to use on their own because part of this patch will be the Monster Energy logo. Now, we did learn this morning, Kansas has announced a 5-year deal with digital finance company Ripple and their XRP cryptocurrency, which will feature patches on their uniforms. So this does answer one of my questions that, is this going to omit teams from being able to have their own jersey patch? Apparently not. So that's what was my concern. When I initially saw this, was like, wow, they're really, they're really not allowing these teams to benefit as much as they could, because a jersey patch for a team like Texas Tech, a jersey patch for a team like Oklahoma State, Arizona State could be in the $4, $5, $6 million range. And if the Monster Energy logo, the Monster Energy Big 12 logo, whatever we're going to call it, is taking away from that, that's really bad on the Big 12's part. But again, this Kansas news coming out earlier on this morning does show the ability for schools to have an additional patch. I guess the Monster logo will just be connected with the Big 12 logo, because again, on uniforms you have the Big 12 logo on one side and you have an open space on the other side that typically features the apparel provider. In Kansas' case, it's Adidas, which I guess, again, the Monster Big 12 logo, I guess, will be on the same side and combined or something along those lines. So that does answer my question of this isn't going to limit teams, but still, $1.25 million seems kind of low, right? Like and I do expect other conferences to kind of follow this model of the entitlement sponsorship thing, where they're saying, hey, we'll allow you to be the entitlement sponsor of the SEC, of the Big Ten, of the ACC, of the new Pac-12, whatever it may be, with funds given out per school. But the Big Ten and the SEC, I don't think they're answering the phone for anything less than like $50 million, right? Like $1.25 million, that's chump change. That's not even going to get you a good quarterback these days in college football. Again, it's better than nothing, because for all these schools, that's $1.25 million they did not have. But I think these other conferences are going to look at this model and saying, yeah, I think we can do better than that, though. We can make more off that than what the Big 12 did. But, hey, I guess give them credit for being a trailblazer, so to speak. But now we're going to have to get used to saying Monster Energy Big 12 football per their branding guidelines as this season goes along. So Big 12 is always doing something a little bit different, and having an entitlement sponsor for your conference is definitely something different. Now, I know like Allstate or Edward Jones, I think, has been involved the past couple years, but not to this degree. Not to like jersey patch, on-field logos, and all that kind of stuff. It's a new age in college football, and when you're trying to make money in any avenue that you can, these are the kind of things that you come up with. But again, I think this is the first of many conferences following this type of model, though I think the other ones will try and get more than $20 million out of it. We'll see. Coming up next, we'll talk some racing with Jen Jensen as the Extra Point rolls along on your Wednesday here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Before we get into NASCAR stuff, real quick, to carry over our conversation from the last segment, if the SEC were to have an entitlement sponsor, what should it be? What is the most SEC sponsor they could think of? Because I think Monster Energy does fit the Big 12 and kind of their identity a little bit. What should the SECs be? Hit me up on the Firehouse Subtext line at 803-404-6100 and let me know. Hit some of those texts come up in the next segment to wrap up the hour. But it's time to talk some racing, and let's go back to Chicagoland this past weekend where this happened.
Great defense for Chase Briscoe and trying to hang on. 3 wins a year ago in the 19, and he's going to see his first checkered flag of the campaign. Here's Chase Briscoe, a winner at Chicagoland.
Let's go, boys! Awesome job!
Chase Briscoe picking up his first win of the season after coming so close on so many other occasions. Jen Jensen, who joins me in the AAA Heating and Air phone lines, was in attendance for NASCAR's return to Chicagoland for the first time in 7 years. And Jen, you were treated to a pretty darn good race.
Yep, I absolutely was. It was a great race. We kind of were hoping for an extra caution or two towards the end just to kind of shake things up a little bit, but it was a really good race. We enjoyed lots of passing, and the views in that track are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there isn't anything you can't see, and that's why I hope it stays on the schedule.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, this was a track that sat dormant since 2019. COVID and everything kind of kicked it off the schedule, and mile and a half at that point in time weren't the best racing, but we know that with the next gen car they are. So I was glad to see it come back on the schedule. It raced pretty similar to how I thought it would, with multiple grooves. Again, you saw Christopher Bell be able to run down Briscoe in those last couple laps, just not quite enough there to get the passing done. You had incidents throughout the field. You had guys wrecking each other. You had Kyle Larson spin out of his own. So it was a pretty action-packed 400-mile race, which is what you want to see at tracks like that.
Yeah, you really do. And, then you had the little bit of drama, which was, just sort of secondary at least with like Hill and Van Gisbergen. And that was kind of a fun little thing that you wouldn't have expected. But yeah, overall you saw, unfortunately, poor Zilich, bless his heart, he's just, what is it, like in the last 7 races, he's only finished 2 running, like bless him.
Yeah, I like Connor Zilich a lot. I'm a big fan of his and what he was doing, last year in the then Xfinity Series. And I was looking forward to his rookie year and seeing what he could do. Obviously, he had his first top 10 of his career at Sonoma the prior week. But when he wrecks on the first lap and it's damage that is going to keep him out of the race, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This kid can't catch a break.
No, he can't. And it's funny. There's one of the Twitter pages or Twitter sites that we've enjoyed following, NASCAR Chasm. He just has he's been putting out like literally prayer circles of sorts, online, just anything to try to get some good vibes going for this kid. Because, yeah, he's so talented, and I really look forward to seeing what he can do if he just can catch a break.
Well, and the thing for him, and we'll get back to Chase Briscoe in a second, but quick aside with Zilich, for him in the first year in the Cup Series, it's about running laps, right? Like, competing for wins, competing for a chase spot, that's high hopes, but realistically, you just want to get out there and get experience. And unfortunately, wrecking and getting caught up in a lot of things that aren't his fault is preventing him from getting those laps and experience that he desperately needs as he makes the transition.
Yep, absolutely. No, that seat time is so valuable, and he's learning how to handle adversity. So I guess what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And he's had, I think, to this point, he's had a pretty good attitude about all of it. But I'm sure he's dejected in some ways, but he's got to put the positive foot forward.
Yeah, well, hey, that's the business of racing in the top series of stock car racing in the world. Is it is not easy, and luck often is not on your side. So I think he'll be fine. He just needs to be able to start running, full races again and get some laps under his belt, and I think he'll settle in due time for sure.
Yeah, no, I do too. And he's one of the young ones that I'm really enjoying watching. And interestingly, not that we'll go down a path right now on Heim, but interesting the amount of Heim shirts that I actually saw at the race. I was surprised. Like, I thought maybe I'd seen one. But I think there were 5 or 6 groups that had somebody in them that had a Corey Heim shirt. And I thought, well, that's interesting, being that he's not even full-time yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's being somebody that's also, being touted as a generational type of talent, and winning at San Diego a couple weeks ago, I think maybe opened the eyes of some people that maybe weren't watching the Truck Series every single week the past couple of years, like, hey, man, this dude is the real deal. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of shirts this weekend in Atlanta because that's the home race for him. But hearing that in Chicago is a little surprising.
I know, it really kind of was. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And again, I speaking of Zillage and Heim, it's like, okay, the youth movement is there and people are embracing that, it looks like. And I love that.
Yeah, the future is bright, no doubt about it. One guy that is going to be around for a long time, hopefully winning races too, is Chase Briscoe, who did pick up the victory. Again, he's been in the mix. He's been close several times this year. Finally breaks through and gets the win. I thought it was interesting. He was talking post-race with the guys on TNT that, he was saying, hey, when I was at Stewart-Haas Racing prior to coming to Joe Gibbs, I'd only won the 2 races, Phoenix and the Southern 500, his last year there. And he's like, I just kind of got in the mindset that I'm just not going to be a guy that's going to win a ton. Well, now he's at Joe Gibbs, and he's now won 4 races in a year and a half. Like, he's somebody that we expect, because he's in that 19 car, to win at a high clip, pretty much every single year. And now that he's got 1 win out of the way, I imagine more are probably coming here probably very soon.
Oh, I think so. No question. And clearly JGR is doing something right. I mean, they finished the race 1, 2, 3. So I think they're doing well on the intermediate tracks. And you've been seeing him a little more towards the front of the pack in a lot of the different races. I mean, he's sitting 8th in points right now. So clearly, if that's just not totally from the win, that's from consistent performance for him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And look, Toyotas in general are dominating this season. They've won 12 out of 19 races so far. They're sitting at the top of the standings, though the gap is now growing. Denny Hamlin had the 1-point lead coming away from Sonoma. Once again, Tyler Reddick runs into problems as he has an issue with oil, with a busted oil cooler on Sunday. A radiator, that regulates him to a bad finish. Now Denny Hamlin has opened it up to a 44-point lead over Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. And again, would Tyler Reddick have expected that after the first, multiple races of the season? But I still think he'll be in the chase. I'm not worried about that. But it just goes to show you can't have a lot of really bad finishes.
Well, and to remind people, when the chase does start, the regular season champion will have a 25-point advantage to start things off with, which is huge. And could be the difference in winning or losing the championship. So that's what Hamlin and Reddick are, because they're kind of the realistically only 2 with a real shot to win the regular season title. That's what they're fighting for right now.
Yeah, I agree. Again, we talked about this before. I still love the fact that they changed the point system, no question. I think it's going this way. It's just making things a lot more competitive. And but we keep seeing shakeups in the points every week, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been a lot of fun to follow every single week, and I'm glad we have the chase back as well. Again, this past weekend was the 4th of July. July 4th was on Saturday. The O'Reilly Auto Parts race did run after quite a bit of a rain delay, but they got the race in. And a lot of conversation coming away from this weekend is, where does NASCAR need to be July 4th weekend? Again, for the longest time, it was always Daytona Beach for the Firecracker /Pepsi 400 /Coke Zero 400 up until a couple years ago. And I understood the move of making that race the end of the regular season as kind of a last winning your get in thing for the playoffs and all that. That's now gone away with the chase making its return. And I am one of many people that would personally love to see it go back to Daytona. If nothing else, just establish an identity somewhere. NASCAR has an identity. Memorial Day weekend for the Coke 600, Labor Day weekend for the Southern 500 at Darlington, but July 4th, it's just been all over the place for the past decade pretty much.
Yeah, it really has, and I'm with you. I always enjoyed it being at Daytona. I thought, the kind of middle of the season or just a little bit past the mid-season point was just kind of a great way to put on a big race there. But I don't know where they should land. I've kind of enjoyed it being around Chicago. I think that's been fun and different, but I don't know what the answer is. I really, really don't. I know that they put on one heck of a fireworks show in Joliet after the race, so that was good. So you definitely get your fill, but I'm not sure what the answer is. I know the Chicago street race, they talk about that being just almost too much the 4th of July weekend as far as, personnel and police and all the things, that it's just almost more taxing than it's worth. So it definitely should be someplace where it's at a track where it can be a little more managed and maintained with all the other 4th of July festivities.
Yeah, again, if nothing else, just pick something and stay with it. Right? If it's going to be Chicago,
stay with it.
Yeah,
correct.
If it's going to be Chicago, great. Do that every single year and make it a tradition. If it's going to be Atlanta, do that every single year and make it a tradition. This constant hopping and back and forth, it hurts your ability to establish an identity on that day again, which NASCAR had for so long.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would like them to do that. And who knows, maybe this year showed them something. And as long as the rain doesn't come in, because I'll tell you, there was a lot that people were dealing with that rain from the day before that night with, there was rain and there was fog, because there was even fog at Wrigley Field. But
right.
There were cars that got stuck, and for the Cup race on Sunday, there was parking that was not available because there was still so much mud, and that's what Kyle Larson found on the front straight. But like I said, as far as where they land, I do hope they pick something. So I definitely concur with your thoughts.
Well, thankfully you were able to get out of that mud and get back here safely. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was telling a couple other people, we kind of knew the direction where to go, so it helped knowing some country roads to get home a little easier.
Well, we transitioned from one exciting race to another one this upcoming weekend. Atlanta Motor Speedway. No, I won't call it Echo Park Speedway. Should be a thriller, and looking forward to talking about it next week.
Me too. It's good to talk to you, Tyler.
Appreciate it as always, Jen. Jen Jensen there of the early game on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines as NASCAR heads in to my home track in Atlanta Motor Speedway this upcoming weekend. As I head into this break, I've been given some tickets by the Ticket Ferry tonight at the True Line Amphitheater up in Charlotte. Santana and the Doobie Brothers at 7 o'clock. I have a family 4-pack of tickets right now for caller number 3 to see Santana and the Doobie Brothers in Charlotte. Call right now at 803-404-6100. We'll wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point coming up next as your Wednesday rolls along here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's our head wrapping up hour number 2 here on your Wednesday on the game. Congrats to Jeff on winning the tickets to see Santana and the Doobie Brothers tonight up in Charlotte. That sounds like a really good concert. I didn't know that was on the schedule there. I'm going to see 5 Seconds of Summer with my wife in like a month. She's a big fan, actually at True Lion Amphitheater ourselves. So looking forward to being up there in that venue for the first time. But congrats to Jeff for winning those tickets. Earlier in the hour, I was talking about Big 12 Media Days. Again, we got into what Brett Yormark had to say when kind of getting spicy back and forth with some of the media members there for asking the questions about Texas Tech. But one of the bigger headlines yesterday was this deal that the Big 12 has announced with Monster Energy to be their entitlement sponsor. And again, it's very much like a NASCAR type of model where now a Big 12 football, men's and women's basketball will carry the Monster branding at the beginning of it. So when you're watching a Big 12 game between Texas Tech and Kansas, on a random Saturday this fall, they'll come back from the commercial and say, hey, it's Monster Energy Big 12 football. And I imagine the logo on the field that's typically just the Big 12 with the Roman numerals XII will have the Monster Energy logo around it or something along those lines. I feel like that's kind of what they're talking about when it comes to the branding in addition to the jersey patch, which, again, I'm assuming is going to be a Monster Energy / Big 12 logo integrated on the uniform where conference logos typically go. Again, Kansas announced this morning they have a deal for a jersey patch that's going to be on the opposite side. So my question of would that prevent schools from having any other jersey patches has been answered. It doesn't. But still, only getting $1.25 million for this deal per school is pretty low, considering what I think other conferences might be able to fetch if they do the similar thing. But I asked the question to you on the Firehouse Subs text line at 803-404-6100 because I think that, Monster Energy kind of fits what the Big 12 is doing. They're trying to be different, trying to be a little bit edgy, trying to be out there a little bit. So Monster's a good brand for that. What is the best corporate sponsor for the SEC? If the SEC said, hey, we're going to sell our entitlement to somebody to be blank SEC football, SEC men's basketball, SEC women's basketball, whatever it may be, what options would be the best? Nameless texter weighs in with Duke's Mayo. Already have the Duke's Mayo Bowl, but in terms of a Southeastern connection, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Duke's entire branding is being a Southeastern company. It's got twang and all that kind of stuff. So Duke's Mayo SEC football certainly has an interesting ring to it. Let's see, some other text. Walmart. Now, I don't know if Arkansas is going to want Walmart's money to go elsewhere. They would much rather all go to them, right? Because Walmart's an Arkansas-based company, much like Tyson, the Tyson chicken nugget money and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if Arkansas would be cool with that, but in terms of fitting the branding of the SEC, yeah, I think Walmart could fit there. Jacob goes with the Quick Trip. Going to go with gas stations. That's not is that a Southeastern thing? I know there's two different ones. I know there's the Quick Trip with a K that you see more than the Midwest, but is QT only in the Southeast? If so, okay, that could certainly work. Let's see here. Some other ones. Waffle House, I like that. The quintessential Southern restaurant. That's kind of the mark when you're elsewhere in the country. Say you're in the Mid-Atlantic or North or something along those lines, and you're driving back home to South Carolina or whatever. When you start seeing Waffle Houses, you're like, all right, I've gotten below the Mason-Dixon line. I've gotten back in the Southeast. I'm back with my people. I can get an all-star special and all those kind of things. So that's a good one. Dollar General, another one. Now, that's not specifically a only Southeastern brand. They are all over the country. But I feel like most people kind of associate that with the South for whatever reason. So that could work. Dollar General, SEC football. I don't know if that has quite the same ring to it. I guess you'd have just a bright. Well, I mean, the SEC logo already has yellow in it, so I guess you kind of integrate that a little bit. That would kind of work. Chuck says Buc-ee's. Yes, that there we go. Now we're thinking. Buc-ee's primarily in the Southeast, obviously originated in Texas, but I think most of their locations are in southern states. Yeah, I could get behind that. You could actually replace the SEC logo with the picture of Buc-ee, right? Because he's in a little circle, and instead of having an SEC patch, you just have a Buc-ee patch on the on the uniforms. I'd like that. Yeah, but Bucky's SEC football. Yeah, that has I could get behind that. You go to Bucky's and get, SEC branded items and things like that. Heck yeah, that'd be cool. Coca-Cola, Chick-fil-A, a lot of good options here. A lot of things that, again, kind of tie to the Southeast that, associated with the SEC. That makes a lot of sense. So appreciate you guys weighing in. A lot of good options there. Will the SEC ever sell an entitlement sponsorship? I don't know. I can tell you what, though. If they do, it's not going to be for $20 million. It's going to be for a lot more. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs as your Wednesday rolls along here on the game.
All right, welcome in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell will be joining me momentarily, and Terry Ford, has stepped into the production room, and we're bringing along. I was going to say virtual Wes, but it's not really virtual. It's a cardboard representation of Wes Mitchell, who will be here shortly. So you'll have to deal with me for just a little bit here and Terry over there in the room. We'll get Terry to weigh in on some things too. Hope everybody's doing well here on your Wednesday, 11:01 here on the game. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. And kicking off this morning, a little bit of a bang, some fireworks post July 4th for the Gamecocks. Gamecocks have landed a 2028 commitment. And so after a big run last week from July 1st to July 4th, as we've documented, as everybody knows, Carolina picked up a string of pretty big-time commitments, depending on the rankings systems that you're looking at, either a 5-star and 3 4-stars or a 5-star, 2 4-stars, and a 3-star last week. And that has created some serious momentum, going into a little bit more of a dead period in recruiting. We're all kind of sitting here last week going, hey, looks like things, great run. Things may slow down now. That's what we kind of prepared everybody for. No visits going on right now. Official visit season's over. Coaches can't go on the road. Prospects cannot visit campus right now. Coaches are kind of out of the building. This is the 1 month of the year they get actually a little vacation and some family time. But now South Carolina has picked up its first 2028 commitment, and that is Joseph Gibbs. He goes by Jet, Terry. Jet Gibbs.
Jet. So I'm guessing nose tackle, right?
No.
No?
No. That would be great. That would be a good name for a nose tackle. But Jet Gibbs, 4-star receiver out of Burlington, North Carolina, Southeast Alamance High School, 6'1", 190. Wasn't really expecting this in terms of timeline. We kind of got a heads up last night or yesterday evening. Hey, this is a guy that looks like he's on the verge of committing to South Carolina, and that's what's happened today. And Rivals Industry Ranking, which for those that don't know, Rivals Industry Ranking takes all 3 of the major recruiting services, Rivals individually, ESPN and 24/7, kind of puts them in a composite ranking and then spits out an average. And so he's the number 236 prospect, regardless of position, in the country for the 2028 class, number 12 receiver in the country, number 8 in the state of North Carolina. And so he's made an early commitment to the Gamecocks, a guy that had really grown his profile over the summer. Went and camped at Clemson. Clemson's only offered one 2028 receiver, but they've really liked this kid. Got a bunch of other Power 4 offers from the SEC and ACC. UNC's offered him, Wake, NC State, most of the big in-state programs there, but also Kentucky, Vandy, Virginia Tech, and some others. And the Gamecocks offered him on the heels of his summer camp performance, which we were there. We were there for all 9. And as soon as we saw this guy, we're like, who is that? This kid looks really good. We find out, and, found out it was Joseph Jet Gibbs. And Gamecocks offered him, stayed on him pretty hard here in the early going, and have landed now a really quality commit to kick off the 2028 class.
All right, couple questions. First of all, let's talk about Mike Furry.
Yeah.
Since this fella's shown up, a lot of wide receivers from the high school ranks ending up at South Carolina. First of all, as a recruiter, my God, this guy's out of control, isn't he?
Well, and that's the thing, Shane Beamer made some changes after the 2023 season. And one of the, really the big thing he pointed to was, hey, we want to bring in more, we want to do a better job of developing young talent. Well, how do you do that at receiver? Recruiting, and development's obviously an important part of it. We've seen some guys develop later here.
Like Xavier Legette.
Xavier Legette's a great example, and that had just happened. It took up until year 5, and then the guy breaks out, and he's a first-round pick. Had tremendous physical tools. But you kind of look back in the early part of the Beamer tenure, and it was a lot of a lot of transfers, and you kind of looked at the recruiting trail, and that, frankly, there were some misses on some guys that they would have loved to have. Antonio Williams from Dutch Fork, who ended up going to Clemson, was one, but there are others. And I think Beamer looked at it as, we've had too many misses here. And so he made the shift. He moved Justin Stepp at the time for a while, was going to coach the tight ends, and then he ultimately left and went to Illinois. Brought in James Coley, proven recruiter, a guy he had been on staff with at Georgia.
A great era of South Carolina coaching, Cooley. Absolutely.
Yes. It goes up there with Mike Bobo and Will Friend.
Yeah.
But Jay, people are probably like, no more coaches who coached at Georgia.
That's right.
But Coley gets here for a spell, and then he leaves to go back to Georgia. He had come here from Texas A&M, and so now, okay, well, who's going to be our receivers coach? And so he plucks Mike Furry, who honestly wasn't really somebody on the radar, but I think really fits the profile of a lot of times what Shane Beamer's look for is a younger, hungrier coach. He had a very, very interesting background because remember Mike Furry, obviously NFL player, actually played DB and receiver in the NFL. Played it quite well. I mean, led the conference in catches one year.
Yeah.
Was a really, really good player. I mean, I remember watching him play. And then became a head coach at Limestone, has coached in the NFL. So just a really fascinating background. And you're right, he's gotten here, and I think he's brought a lot of energy to the trail. You look at the 2025 class, and that's the one where you really started seeing the fruit of what Mike Furry was doing on the recruiting trail. He brings in a 6-man class, and one of them in Brian Rowe left, but it was five stars. And then your only, 3-star was Jaden Sellers, who had a pretty good year as a true freshman in the back half of the year. And then, he's followed that up. You look at the 2026 class, his son Stone Furry. They took a smaller class by design. Sequel Patterson, a 4-star in-state guy who certainly had some big offers, reclassified from 2027 to 2026. You look at this class, he's got 3 receivers committed, Javian Robinson, DJ Huggins, and then the highest-ranked guy is Ivion Lewis, a 4-star from Virginia that the Gamecocks flipped from Kentucky this summer, and now already off to a good start in 2028 with another 4-star in Joseph Gibbs. So you're right. I mean, this is a guy that's come in, and his goal was, hey, get more young talent on the roster to develop. And so far, so good on that front.
You know what's interesting, too? Sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. But remember the first time you talked to Furry? We had him at Shane's golf tournament a couple years ago. And when you talk to him, you're like, oh, I get it now. All right. This dude is like a lot of energy. You could just a conversation. Sometimes you'll walk away from one of these guys and go, I see why he does so well, or he's going to do well, or why they hired him. Because like you said, he was off the radar. It was like Mike Furry. Because you go, I remember that guy in the NFL. And then you start looking him up going, what's a limestone? And then you start to get, these pieces of it. And then you talk to him. And I remember he left and we looked at each other and went, okay, now I see why this guy was hired. I mean, this dude's got more energy in 10 minutes than I got in like 10 days. So, and you see him on the recruiting trail. And now you've seen this with the running back situation as well. The running back recruiting hadn't gone well the last few years. Well, Coach Drayton's here, and now all of a sudden you see the running back recruiting picking up to develop, like you said. You can't develop them, Chris, if they're not here. I heard that from somebody really smart once.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you're looking at, go back to Shane Beamer's comments after that season when he made the change, when he shifted the staff, we got to do a better job of developing young talent. And if you're, obviously South Carolina under Beamer has utilized the transfer portal. They'll continue doing that. They utilized it this past season, this past offseason, brought in a few guys from the transfer portal, Nitro Tuggle, DJ Black, Charlie Mulally. They're going to continue doing that. But you want to start with high school. You want to bring guys into your program and be able to develop them. But you can also, receiver, if you're good enough, you can get on the field early. We saw that last year with Jaden Sellers, and Donovan Murph played a lot.
Yeah, Rowe played.
Rowe played a lot. He showed some flashes. Not here anymore, but nonetheless he did. So about half the class played a role. And now you've got kind of a mix of guys who are now sophomores, and then you got some redshirt freshmen. But you want to continue stacking this type of talent on the roster. So, yeah, you're right. You look at the outlook positionally, it just looks a lot better in terms of consistently bringing in young talent at the receiver position. So, we were watching, to go back to your point on Furry, we were watching him at one of the summer camps. I want to say it was maybe the last day of camp or the 8th day of camp. There was 9 camps this summer. We're sitting there watching Furry, and West goes, we're just kind of watching him put the guys through drills, and he goes, this guy was just born to coach, and you can tell he loves it. You're right, super high energy, and he has cachet with players. Not all. There are great coaches who never sniff the NFL.
Right.
There have been coaches that didn't even play football in the past. Most of them have, obviously, but this is a guy that has done it at the highest level at the position he's coaching. And so that gives them some cachet and some trust with players. Hey, I played in the NFL. I know what it takes. I've coached in the NFL. I've been a position coach in the NFL. I know what it takes to get there. And, he does a really good job, I think, on the recruiting trail of building relationships. He's not afraid to swing big on guys. And I think that's really what it's all about. Yes, is a lot of recruiting nowadays about what can you get guys in NIL. Yeah, that's obviously part of it, much more than it was, in the early part of NIL, certainly much more than the pre-NIL era where it's all, frankly, under the table stuff.
Well, except your favorite school, because they never did anything.
They never did that.
Yeah, right. Just the other school.
That's part of it. But recruiting is still, it's a lot about building relationships and effort and want to. And Mike Furry's a guy that likes to go get after it on the trail. So, again, to circle back to the Jet Gibbs commitment, we all knew South Carolina offered. Figured, hey, this is a guy that'll probably, and he probably will. I mean, this will probably kick off his recruitment. We'll probably see more schools continue to offer because that's just what happens. Sure. It's still early. A lot of times when a guy makes an early commitment nowadays, continue to see the new offers flow in. A prospect of his caliber, you're probably going to continue seeing that. But Gamecocks get him in the boat early. He loved what he saw. They loved what they saw out of him. And a really, really nice pickup here to kick things off for the 2028 class.
And when we get back, you guys had a post here recently about look, South Carolina's always recruited North Carolina because, again, last time I checked, they're connected, the states, unless they moved them. But it feels like the ramping up of getting more quality players from the state of North Carolina has picked up. And since you know 100 times more about it than me, we'll let you discuss this next. Does that work?
That works.
We can do that. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Terry hanging while Tyler's at our staff meeting, eating food. By the way, you are invited, sir, to go eat food after you're done here.
I've heard. Upstairs. I ran into on the way here, coming out of the garage. I ran into Dreamy Josh.
Did you?
He also extended an invite. First of all, I went, Josh, I was surprised to see him. It's Wednesday. Doesn't normally come in ever.
Well, you had to stop and look. It's like, hell, that's Josh.
That's Josh. It's not Monday. Why are you here?
Well, what are you doing?
Why are you not in the Bahamas or something?
Well, it's vacation season for Dreamy Josh, too, because the wife's off work.
There you go.
So seeing him in the parking lot threw you to start with.
I was very thrown off, but
and he did invite you for food.
Yes, I said, what are y'all having? He said, I'll let you know. I'll shoot you a text.
Oh, it's good. It's like it's Louisiana Kitchens. It's a little taste of Louisiana.
I'll be there right after the show.
Yeah, I've always noticed when you're interested in the food, you show up for the post meeting spread. When you're not interested, I see you walking to the parking lot.
Most people up there are like, who is that? Does he kind of work here?
Someone did like a couple of years ago when we first started doing all this, and you came up, someone said, is he in sales? I don't know him.
No, I'm not. I pretend.
All right, so we'll come back. We'll kind of dip into that thing about how South Carolina is even doing better in the state of North Carolina, and we have a special guest. Don't move that head. You keep the head on your hold the head up for the whole hour. All right, Wes Mitchell's here as well. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here on the Game Network, at the Game TV Radio and YouTube. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Tyler is up at our big staff meeting. He'll be back here shortly. Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell's has replaced his head. Wes Mitchell's whole body is here. We're talking recruiting, 2028 recruit, the first one for 2028 with a great first name, Jet.
Great name.
That's a fantastic name.
We were looking, looking up some more stuff about Jet since we got this news out. He's 10.5 in the 100-meter.
10.5? Well, we
Pretty
three
good.
in high school ran 10.5.
In the 50.
10 meter.
10 meter. That's pretty bad. No, a little bit faster than that.
All right, so are you in? Oh, I got to change the camera, don't I?
I wanted people to see my.
You know what? I got to change the camera. Once you guys start talking, I'll come change the camera. I want to get you guys.
Or the graphic is up, is what I'm saying.
Oh, well, let me fix that. Hold on for a minute.
But
talk amongst yourselves.
Do you think this guy is going to be like? Is he Joseph Jet Gibbs, or is this like a Debo where you're just Jet Gibbs?
Just
like,
Jet. Yeah, we'll call him Jet.
Like, will he be on the roster as Jet Gibbs?
I hope so.
Yeah, this would be good to just with the name Jet Gibbs. All right, you're good now, Wes.
You have to be pretty fast to have the name Jet. Like that's a name. That's a nickname that's earned.
Oh yeah,
I feel like
you don't just get that one. You don't give that one to yourself either. No, you got to earn Jet. You just can't walk in and go, "I'm Jet." You got to get
the only way you can do that is if you walk into every single room and you're the fastest person in that room, because that's one of those things where people may roll their eyes at first and then they might just be like, shrug. Okay, yeah, you are Jet. But good. I mean, I don't know what all y'all said during the first segment, but obviously, first disclaimer: long way to go to 2028.
That's right,
but,
long way.
You'd rather have a guy committed than not, I think, is the way I look at these things. And this is a kid who was very, very good at camp for Carolina last month, is already a top 300 player in the country. Confirmed speed. It's one thing to be like, that guy's fast, but you have all these different track times and, 40-yard dashes. They run 40s at the camps at South Carolina. Like, this is a confirmed, on-the-clock speedster. And there's some, I would say, short space speed, but also when you start talking about the 100, you're talking about that long speed, that top-end speed, and someone that, I think can play one of those outside receiver spots for South Carolina and has, Chris, some height as well.
I want to throw this both at you. You guys had a recent post on Gamecock Central about how South Carolina is upping the commit list from the state of North Carolina. And like I said to Chris, South Carolina's always recruited the state. It's not like all of a sudden they discovered, wow, there's a state above us called North Carolina. But I guess both of you guys kind of riff a little bit on how South Carolina is pulling more commits from North Carolina now.
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, say what you want about Mac Brown and, his era at UNC, but, I mean, this dude can recruit. And so I think you had a situation there where he really did a great job of closing the doors to other programs. That didn't mean you weren't going to get some guys here and there, but I always thought that was an area as, one of the closest SEC schools that South Carolina could potentially be dominant in the state of North Carolina, especially you start talking about Charlotte. You're essentially a state of South Carolina city if you were in the Charlotte area. And there's really a lot of people who kind of work in Charlotte but live in that Fort Mill area. Like, it's all kind of combined together. So, to me, that's always been an area that South Carolina should have been able to do well in. And I think they've just doubled down in terms of their effort in that state. I think Mac Brown no longer being a coach has helped. And, I mean, I also just think it's one of those things where you start having a little bit of success and it can maybe kind of give you some momentum there. Kids maybe, I know that guy. He's going to South Carolina. Let me check them out as well. I mean, I think the Josh Dobson commitment, honestly, even though he's not even technically originally a state of North Carolina guy, like getting some kids from Huff, I think helps you. And, I think getting Noah Clark last year probably helps you. The Harris twins, like it really is one of those things where if you can just break through with a couple of guys, that can maybe lead to more success down the road.
Well, and this has been a talking point among Gamecock fans because you look at some of the Like, they've had some dudes from the state of North Carolina in the past. I mean, Melvin Ingram, state of North Carolina, just to name one. And under Shane Beamer, you went not just one cycle, but multiple cycles not signing anybody from North Carolina. Nick Barrett in 2021 was a Muschamp holdover, signed with the Gamecocks, stuck with the program. But then 22 and 23 and 24, I think, didn't sign anybody from the state of North Carolina. So you went 3 cycles without doing it. Then in 2025, you started breaking through. You got Brian Rowe. Obviously, he's transferred, but you got Rowe. You got Tayshawn Austin, also transferred. You got Donovan Darden. And so you started making some more inroads. And then, Wes, some of the guys that you just mentioned from the 2026 class, you go get Aiden and Andrew Harris out of North Carolina. You go get Cassie Barnes from Greensboro. You go get Noah Clark from Durham. And now, you get Gibbs in the 2028 class. Your very first commitment is from the state of North Carolina. Mentioned some guys that they've gotten in 2027. John Archer, big-time defensive tackle commitments from Fayetteville. So I think that's something that's positive, because this is an area where, if you're South Carolina, you want to start in-state. They kind of consider Charlotte an in-state territory, but also there's a lot of really good players in North Carolina, particularly, something we always talk about, JC from the Big Spur always talks about D-line heaven being in the Carolinas.
Mm-hmm.
Guy like John Archer absolutely fits that bill. There's a lot of good players in that state. Now they've kind of flipped the script, flipped this narrative. It is more than a narrative, it's reality when you look at, guys that they did not get from that state for a few cycles, but they've started to turn that around. They've now been much more of a presence in North Carolina.
All right, so now you get the 28 commit for wide receiver. You guys said you kind of didn't see it coming this quick. Is there any other 28 commits coming through this pipeline, or are we kind of like, all right, this is sort of where it's at right now?
Yeah, and it's funny how these things, we always talk about it, Terry, they come in bunches, they come in waves, and, even it plays out that way, even if guys aren't connected to one another whatsoever. And so, I would look next at Jamari Kane, who is a receiver at Huguenot up in Virginia. He has a public announcement set for Thursday. He's down to South Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Kentucky. And, I think, interesting enough, South Carolina has a teammate of his coming over 2027 in Ivion Lewis. Kentucky was a finalist for Ivion as well. He was committed to Kentucky at one point. He flipped to South Carolina. So some overlap there in terms of the schools that are involved with Jamari Kane. And, that would be the guy I would keep an eye on, obviously with a public announcement set to potentially be added to the class as well.
I will get back in here. We got a little conversation. We have Big 12 Media Days. SEC Media Days is coming up. Big 12 Media Days this week. And Big 12 kind of made a splash, so to speak. They got a new name. We'll get into that next here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Terry and Chris and Wes and Tyler will be back here soon on the Game Network, and at the Game TV Radio on YouTube.
All right, everybody, let's tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. We love telling you about local businesses who we have personally used, and that's certainly the case with Michael, Nathan, and the team over at Integrated Media. They've been to my home and Wes's home on multiple occasions to help us with a variety of audiovisual and tech projects. For Wes, it's making sure that his internet was running in tip-top shape for GC Live, other streaming purposes. Got to make sure we got quick internet at the home office. They helped him with that. For me, they put my video game systems on a switcher. They've helped me with mounting televisions at my home. They can do the exact same for you or any of your other audio-visual or tech projects. They can make your home into a smart home where you can control your lights, devices, thermostats, devices, and even your security and cameras, all from the touch of a button, whether you're home or away. A true one-stop shop. They can source the equipment and professionally install it. IntegratedMediaInc.com. Check them out today.
Gamecock Central Takeover Hour sponsored by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Terry hanging in for Tyler for a few minutes. Wes and Chris are here. You know, usually, guys, because we have SEC Media Days coming up, and of course, we'll be there 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Elijah will be sleeping by the equipment at the Marriott in Tampa. We will be there like always, but Big 12 Media Days is kicked in. And we'll get to the commission, his kind of lame responses to the Texas Tech questions. But first, you now have. Let me run this over you. Right, I want to try to get this done the right way. So your Big 12, you have a football, your football and your men's and women's basketball. And now you've put a sponsorship ahead of it, which sounds a little weird. Your energy drink sponsorship. And you only got $20 million out of it. Now, $20 million sounds like a lot of money, guys, until you go, wait a minute, we have 16 teams, $20 million. You're getting $1.5 million to say this. It's Monster Big 12 football. Boy, it's got a ring to it. And then you're giving them logo space. You're giving them all this stuff. Now, guys, again, call me crazy. Shouldn't that be worth a hell of a lot more than $20 million? Because if you're a team like South Carolina, let's say you want to sell logo space or in your uni. Well, guys, we got Monster now. I can make more than you're giving me for Monster locally on my logo. It seems like you undersold yourself in the Big 12 for the Monster Energy Drink Big 12 football.
Yeah, I don't understand it at all, because you are giving away prime real estate on the jerseys. And I do think that is something that when I've asked people around South Carolina, hey, is there any chance we're going to see a jersey sponsorship for South Carolina this year? One of the answers has been, hey, you got to be careful about that because it's so new. Nobody quite knows how to value that, right? And, there's not really a ton of precedent. We're seeing more and more, I guess, deals get done in terms of that stuff. And then it comes down to, okay, how do you split that up? Do you have a school-wide, hey, football or basketball programs or baseball, one sponsor for everybody? Or do you split that up and say, hey, we're going to sell football separately, we're going to sell women's basketball separately, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same company. And I mean, guys, for 1 point, I think it's actually like 1.25 mil per school or so. I mean, yeah, you could probably just do football I would have thought for more than that.
Yes.
Like way, 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 way more than that. Shoot, at South Carolina, you should be able to get that out of women's basketball alone. And you're talking about giving away your entire conference sponsorship. And here's what I want to know. So the NCAA allows the jersey patches. Now, that had to be approved by the NCAA to do that. Well, does that Munster take up the one space you have, or will some teams still have Munster and now
something else
second
on the other side?
jersey spot? So now we're going down the NASCAR rabbit hole very, very quickly.
Yep.
And to me, it's just kind of like, all right, did all the schools agree to this? I mean, I know maybe you're like, hey, we didn't have to do any work for this extra 1.25 mil a year, but there are some opportunity costs if you are giving up a space on those jerseys that you could have had your in-house local team go out and sell.
Hey, Chris, are we in the danger of, because everybody's grabbing money so fast now, like sometimes you grab it in the short term, not thinking about the long term. It's like when you get a credit card when you're like 21, and you get that like $500 spending limit, and in 2 days you spent your $500 and now you got to pay it back with the 27% interest.
Yeah, as soon as you walk on, when you're doing orientation at college, there's
credit
20
cards,
tenths.
Baby.
Here you go.
So
dangerous.
So is the Big 12? Are you, because you're grabbing money, trying to get money now? Did somebody not think, whoa, wait a minute, fellas, let's just take a breath, like you said, Wes, and let's wait and kind of get some figures here and do some fancy analytics and forecasting before we just go grab a random $20 million from Munster? Is this a little short-sighted, Chris?
I think well, first of all, to answer Wes's question, Sports Business Journal does say that Big 12 programs can sell their own commercial jersey patches. Now, I guess it would have to be approved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they can't sell. Yeah, they could. Texas Tech couldn't say, we're going to have Red Bull and Monster. They do have to give exclusivity to Monster, which makes sense. I think there's two things. Number one, and they're kind of getting hammered on this a little bit because of the value that they're getting. $20 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you start breaking it down for what Monster's getting, great deal for them.
And then think about what 3 sports.
Yeah.
So now it's not just one. Now you break it down even farther.
Break it down each school, break it down each sport, like you said, and it's not as much. But I also think, at the end of the day, is this the type of deal that the Big 12 can get? I saw some stuff on social media. The SEC wouldn't have even picked up the phone for that, and they wouldn't have. Neither would the Big 12, which is kind of what Big 10.
Big 10, yeah.
I can't see the Big 10 saying, "Yeah, we'll take it." They seem a little bit like frou-frou, like high on their own supply type.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, we're not going to take Monster.
Some them, right?
I don't know, and I know Tyler last hour is going through, fielding some inquiries or some ideas from the Firehouse Subs text line about who would be a sponsor match for the SEC. But we've heard some of
Dr. Pepper is the answer.
Dr. Pepper, I said it's a good one.
Yeah, Dr. Pepper.
But we've heard some of the money that's been spent on some of the, we're still kind of getting into this commercialization of fields and jersey patches. We've heard some of the numbers that are being floated around, and per school in the SEC, they're a lot higher than $1 million. So is this just, maybe the Big 12 could have done better on this deal, but also, are they going to attract the type of dollars that a Big 10 or SEC is going to? Probably not.
And to be fair, guys, to your point, we'll take a step back and look at the Big 12. Who's the big brand in the Big 12? Thank you.
I was about to say, am I supposed to know the answer to this?
We went over. That's a Tyler Head quiz question. Who's the big brand in the Big 12? There really isn't, right? When you lost Oklahoma and Texas, you lost your big brands. So to be fair, as we all take turns beating up the Big 12 over only $20 million, dude, maybe this is the best they could do because, right now your big brand, Texas Tech, because of, I guess, the noise they make and the money they spend.
Who could the Pac-12 get, or the Pac-8? Remember when they were the Tupac for a little while?
Like
they had.
Who are you going to go with? Washington State or Oregon State?
Like Little Debbie or something.
Well, as I see people all pointing out on social media too, how about BYU having to wear a Monster Energy?
Yeah. The people who don't go near caffeine.
Yes.
Yes.
This is like the most caffeinated drink on the planet, I think.
and you can't even go near caffeine.
Yeah, there's some.
Well, they're probably the biggest brand. Out west, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is gigantic.
Well, and as we saw, when they need to put the money behind keeping their coach, they found some money in the banana stand.
Trust me, that banana stand is really nice too.
Yeah.
I worked in Boise and I worked in Seattle, and there's the presence of that entity is crazy, and they print money. They put their faces on money, so they're probably the biggest brand and the biggest spender in the Big 12 with Texas Tech, as financially. But BYU's got. And they've got, matter of fact, they've got a garage.
Yes.
Just filled with money.
Yeah, and so, guys, I will say this. Not that I want the jerseys to look like a NASCAR, but I do think finding more ways to introduce, what would you call it, corporate activations to where a lot of this, the money we saw going into NIL from your boosters and your fan base, that's drying up already. People are not getting the return. These numbers that the players are commanding at this point are just too big for your fan base to be the one who funds everything. So I know people kind of cringe a little bit. They're putting a logo on the field. They're putting a logo on the jerseys. They're building these premium seating areas that us normal people will never, ever see. Well, guess what? To me, that is kind of the demand right now, because otherwise you're going to have to keep trying to ask your fan base to fund NIL and rev share and all that stuff. And I just don't think that's long-term sustainable. So the sustainability of college football as we know it at this point is probably based on being able to continue to add these corporate sponsorships.
Yeah, it's tough to get that $25 a month from your fan base if you want to have a $40 million roster.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yes.
Hey, Tyler's back. The food smells really good, by the way. It's making me hungry.
All right.
So Tyler's back. I will go upstairs and sample the food to let you guys know how good it is, and we'll probably see you too.
Send us a review
at noon. All right, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. We'll get back in here. I know Tyler's got his 59-day fact he's got to get to and some trivia. That's coming up next here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on the Game.
All right, welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris back with you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the past 45 minutes with Terry.
Tyler, where you been, man?
I was upstairs.
Yeah.
Company business, man. When the big boss says we have a meeting, well, it's probably in your best interest to attend that meeting.
Yeah.
Good strategy.
Guess so.
There is also food for you guys when you leave.
I've heard.
There's jambalaya. And other
What's your
stuff.
review?
I have not tasted it yet. I have the bowl. I've not tried it yet.
It's going to be cold.
Well, I had to get back down here.
Could have eaten it while you were sitting over there.
I had to get all my stuff ready to come back in here.
Okay. You are a prepared
Show
man.
comes first.
Company man.
Exactly. Company man. Well, I guess for the last segment, we'll do our 59 days until kickoff trivia question. That's all we have time for. Did we have a guys naming dudes for 59, by the way?
Oh.
We do anything for that?
No.
Chase Kibble.
I couldn't come across anything good.
Yeah, that's kind of a reserve D-line, long snapper-ish type number.
Yeah.
I think we'll skip guys naming dudes today.
Okay,
Well,
fair enough.
hold on, real quick.
Oh.
I can't place this guy. There was a long snapper,
of course,
back during Spencer Landing's time at Carolina.
Lanny Spencer?
And I can see his face. And was there a guy named Charles David, or am I making that up? And was he 59? Oh, or hold on.
Not Charles David. You're on the right track.
No. Charles Turner.
Yeah.
But Chris, do you have it up?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, scroll to the bottom.
Okay.
Tell me what his full name is.
Charles David. Oh my gosh. How
that
would
poll?
you know that?
How about that poll?
That is
And
ridiculous.
all right, what number was he?
Well, 59.
59. There you go.
Okay,
So
there's our
there's
59.
our
Wes has gone next
Guys naming
level.
dudes.
We have gone to guys naming dudes, and he knows the middle name of a long snapper
Well,
from
what-
the early Spurrier era.
Did he sometimes go by CD Turner?
Yeah,
Charles David?
maybe.
It was not. That David was public at some point, I'm telling you. But so I went to high school with Spencer, and he and Charles David Turner, CD, I believe, are like roommates. Like, they were good friends. So
Okay, so you have a little bit of an.
Yes.
I was getting a little worried about you.
yeah, this was back when, like, this was a long time ago. Like, I was in school, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
All right.
All right, we ready?
Carry on, Tyler. We're running
All
out of
right.
time.
Yes, we are. 59 days until kickoff. Had to get creative with this one. So we're going to go 5.9. That is the average third down distance Carolina had in one game against a Power 4 opponent last year. The only game last season where they had an under 6-yard average on third down against Power 4. What game was that?
Kentucky.
That was Kentucky. 5.9 average third down distance, and they converted 53% of their third downs, best in both marks against Power 4 opponents last season.
Should we tell them?
Yeah.
Why are you not even shocked that we immediately got it? It's such an obscure question.
Maybe I'm a little suspicious.
Okay. All right. Terry accidentally gave away the answer.
Dang it. What'd he say?
He just gave away the answer. He said Kentucky.
He came in during the break and said, Tyler, when he gets back, we'll do trivia. I think it's, and I said, well, can you give it to, I was joking. He's like, no, I can't give it to you. So, okay. And then we just moved on.
Then he started giving us the question.
Oh, okay.
But then when he gave us the question, though, he was like, yeah, it was something about how in the Kentucky game they averaged 5.9.
Hey, wait a minute.
We're
okay. All right. So an assist from Terry.
So then we decided we were going to get it immediately and see how you reacted. But you do have confidence in us. I'll give you that. You didn't say you cheated.
Hey, you guys know your stuff, and if you both came to that answer that quickly, not completely shocking. And we did talk about the third down stuff a lot last year because I charted this for every game, and we kept up with them. Like, hey, maybe they just remembered that the Kentucky game was the best, at least Power 4. Like, the Coastal game was better. It was 5.3 and converted 54%. But for Power 4, Kentucky was the best, and obviously won that game pretty handily.
Yeah, I'm just going to be honest. I definitely wouldn't have gotten there that quickly. I may have gotten there, but I actually don't think I would have.
I don't know what I would have guessed. I might have landed on Kentucky, but yeah, Terry with an assist. Are we giving a point? Are we punished?
I mean, if I give both you guys the point, it doesn't really make a difference, right?
So yeah.
So
fudge is our overall percentage. That's fine.
You don't want to count it towards the overall percentage?
No, we should count it.
Yeah, we're counting it.
All right.
We need some help.
By the way, you guys are at 14.5 out of 22. We've actually been on a pretty good run here as of late.
That's not bad.
Some of us have been.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Only one of you has to answer the question correctly.
What are you, like 4 in a row?
5? I think a good bit more than that, right, Tyler?
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6.
What?
Going back to last week.
Wow.
And you're still leading by half a point. It's 11 to 10.5 now.
I think oh yeah, we only had 4 shows last week.
Yeah.
I think I was 4 for 4 last week.
I think you were. Any suggestions for 58? Anybody?
Marky Anderson. I don't know. Not really. We'll reconvene.
I'll
Got to
dive
get creative
into it and
on
see
that
what
one.
I find. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show up next on your Wednesday on the Game.